the thing that I have now known to my deepest core, especially over the last 2 years of kind of passing that 1.7 to $3 million threshold, is I am a visionary. I am a founder. I am a scaler. I am a cowboy in a lot of regards. I love systems. I love working systems, but I still have that firefighter cowboy in me. When I cross the threshold from 2.5 to 3 and now farther, my company does not need a cowboy founder scaler anymore. We need a professional managing CEO.
Welcome to the Painter Growth Podcast, where we help you scale your painting company in record time. Join us as we explore sales, marketing, hiring, finances, leadership, and more, everything that you need to know to scale and grow your painting business. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. What's up, everybody? Mike Hickman here, founder of paintergrowth.com, and thank you for tuning in to the Painter Growth Podcast. We're trying to help the painting industry grow together, and I think Nick has said before, rising tides lift all ships, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to professionalize the industry with none other than Mr. Nick Slavik, chairman of the PCA and founder and operator. No, what's the word that you... Proprietor?
I like to say proprietor to be very pretentious.
Proprietor of Nick Slavik Painting. And you can't be more pretentious than having your company be called your full name.
Well, so I am, I got raised in this industry 30 years ago. And back then I call it trades V1, my father's generation of trades. And now we're in trades V2, which is you and sort of me. And I have a foot in both world. There wasn't a dang person in the United States that didn't call their company their first and last name or their last name and then what they do. This is Slavic Landscaping. This is Gore Hickman Concrete. Hey, that's how it was, man.
Yeah. Or like Slavic and Sons.
That's it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So 30 years, how old are you?
So I'm 41. And
41.
I got started in the family business when I was 10 years old. So yes, it sometimes people check me, because there's that craftsman bravado and ego. When I say I use my over 30 years of experience in the industry to help other people, they're like, wait a second, dude, you don't look like you're 150 years old, right? And it's like, well, listen, I got thrown into this trade when I was 10 years old, man.
Yeah. And not every year in business is equal. I know guys that have been in business for 30 years who don't know anything about business.
Listen, that is something that I never hear anybody say. But I will say this, in my 30 years, I have spent 25, 26, 27 of those completely unintentional. And the last 6 years were worth 1,000 times more than my first 25 in the industry, honestly.
Yeah. One thing I find really unique about your painting company is, first of all, the logo. I love it. I don't see a mustache though. You have a beard ish, but no mustache. Is that going to come back?
Yeah. So not if my wife has anything to say about it. So my youngest daughter, Pookie, who is 8, she loves the mustache. She thought it looked so funny on daddy. And my wife throws up into a trash can every time I discuss having a mustache again. So no, I think I have to go back to a little bit of beard for now, but I wouldn't be surprised,
Yeah. I mean, I'm a family man first, and you know what? You don't want to live and die by happy wife, happy life, but it sure makes things a little bit easier.
Well, and you extend that to everything else, the golden rule, happy everybody, happy life, right? And you know what? If sometimes you got to make Pookie happy, sometimes you got to make the wife happy, and sometimes you just got to look like your logo,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So Slavic Painting, this podcast is about Nick Slavik Painting, rather. Is that right? Nick Slavik Painting?
Well, if you want to get super
and restoration,
Nick Slavik Painting and Restoration Company, and it's CO period. Very stylized.
Okay, very stylized. Yeah. You found a way to grow your company, but at least your online presence still feels like a very, very homegrown type of feeling. Like if I call Nick Slavik Painting and Restoration Co., I'm going to have a great experience. And I feel like your online marketing and your branding has done a good job towards, perpetuating that. How have you managed to balance scaling a business and keeping that kind of homegrown personality?
Yeah. So number one, we are homegrown. We do a really, really good job. And we know that we have to do a good paint job, and we have to always exceed the client's expectations, but it's also the experience too. So 15 years ago, when I founded this company, we led with that. I am highly energized by making people happy. Paint can do that, but also experience can do that too. And when you put those two together, that is a supercharged thing. There's not many home service companies that can do a good job and also give the client a good experience. So honestly, the marketing, it's sort of the chicken and the egg thing. We didn't have this whiz bang marketing, and then the company followed suit. We were always this, and then eventually 10 years into it, we decided, hey, we should probably just like at least be accurate and possibly even brag a little about who we are and what we do. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think if the marketing, my marketing is not genius, right? I'm not smart enough to look out into the future and say, this is what the home service market needs, this and that. If there's anything we do really well, it's that our marketing is an exact portrayal and it's genuine to who we are. And people love that when things are just is as it seems.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So two aspects of it, great customer service and a great quality job. And I mean, it sounds like anything in business. As you were saying that, I was just picturing back to some of the jobs that I'd produced. Like if you provide, like I always provided a great customer experience, but sometimes my painters fell short, and that's just part of business, right?
Yeah.
It happens. I was just, what is worse, you think, having a great customer service and disappointing on the quality, or having a mediocre customer service and an excellent quality?
So two thoughts about that. One of the most genius things that is true and hard for a master craftsman like myself to take in and accept. I had somebody. There's a mentor of mine who runs a business about twice as mine, and he was one of the first guys to put his arms around me. And I remember him initially 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago tell me, Nick, you know what? The key to success in this business is A to A minus customer service and a B to B minus paint job. If you can do that on every single job, you will literally have one of the most profitable, most highest rated companies in the country. And I was just like, as that single owner operator, master crafts person, I was like, you got it all wrong, dude. I can be a grumpy old curmudgeon. I can treat people like crap. As long as I give them like museum quality restoration, they're going to look past that. They may even think it's kind of cool that I'm a weird curmudgeon. That is not how the world works anymore, man. So now that is true. And it took me a lot of years to understand that. I don't necessarily try to practice that now, but it is a true thing. That is true for the industry as it is now. There is almost nobody who has a professional company. So if you answer your phone and you're not a crook, it's likely you're going to do very well in business.
It's
That will
likely you'll
not,
get the job.
dude, this will not always be the case. A decade from now, we are going to have a whole bunch more people like you and like me and the Jason Parises and the Brad Ellisons out there who run professional companies. And it's not going to be enough to just do an okay paint job with good service. They're going to be rating against great paint job, great service.
You know what? I was just talking to Brad about that, Brad Ellison, and he was saying that oftentimes when he does an estimate, they're exactly on time. They provide a great, looking detailed proposal, provide great customer service, a little bit of sales technique, and they can be double the price of anyone else, and they'll still get the job. But what he wants to do is he's even completely open-handed with his competitors and helping them become better, because as they get better, the industry gets better, and if the industry gets better, we all win.
We all win. And right now, like you said at the start, we all do better when we all do better. This may not be the case all the time, but right now, honestly, you can look at the exact day, month, quarter that I started collaborating with guys like Brad Ellison, Jason Paris, and the PCA. And that's when the hockey stick curve for myself personally and professionally went up like that. So it has only helped me getting together with other painters.
And that's what I'm trying to do here as well. With my own business, learn from people like you, learn from people like Brad, and everyone else at the PCA and beyond. So let's get back to the business. So you've been in business for 15 years.
15 years, yeah.
15 years. Okay. 27? Does that mean you're 27?
So I'm 41. I started in
26.
2017. Yep. 15.
Okay.
Yeah. 15 years of business right now. So, yep.
Excellent. So recently, you said the last few years you've seen quite a bit of growth because you focused on it. What changes did you make in how you ran the business and how you managed your time that allowed yourself to scale your business quickly?
I did all the changes. And again, there's a theme in my life where I'm not smart enough to plan all these things ahead. I've made a bunch of lucky sort of decisions or choices or directions with my life. And one of them was to focus on myself pretty heavily. as I'm growing or just a little bit before I'm growing. Cause I just assumed I have this self-effacing sort of personality where I always assume it's my fault first, and I work to solve whatever I can first and then start looking to improve my environment around me. And that was very, very beneficial because I came from this super regressive trades background, trades V1. Remember my dad's sort of version of the trades.
Yeah.
And I will say this really quickly. Love my father's generation of the trades. It was perfect for their time. I see the transition kind of tough on a lot of trades V1 members right now. And the way that my father led his company, love my father, but he ran it in a way where it was just screaming at young people. And I did the same thing when I started my company, and I just lost a lot of good people. So immediately I
Why
was like,
can't we find any good painters around here? Nobody wants to work.
so that is a 8-hour discussion between you and me, because that the remnants of trades V1 is still here. People pay nothing, they expect everything, and treat everybody like crap. And they're like, oh, these kids these days, you know. So anyway, that is a longer discussion, but I was actually doing that in my business. And so I took a step back and I figured, you know what? This doesn't feel like anybody younger than me responds to this well. So let's work on myself first. Let's find out what real leadership and management is. And I sort of assumed this really empathetic, caring, mentoring, developing sort of leadership style. And it really took hold.
Servant leadership.
Sure. That's exactly it, man. I love that you use that phrase.
Yeah, absolutely. I find myself doing the same thing. It's like whenever someone on my team messes up, it's always my fault. 100% of the time, it's because they weren't empowered, they didn't have the tools, they didn't have the knowledge, they didn't have the resources, they didn't have something, and because they messed up, it was my fault.
Yep.
And that's not a common philosophy.
No, and especially when it's really interesting to see. I want to use all my words accurately here, because when you think about systems thinking, like we have 40 people in the field right now. If you set up the game board correctly and you put the right incentives out there, everybody is happier and they produce better and they show up more often and they just like their jobs. If you as the leader, this is hard for a Minnesotan, I'm passive aggressive and introverted. It's hard for me to accept that my actions can affect this much of other people, but it is absolutely true, where if you set up the wrong pay and comp plan, the wrong standard operating procedures, you put wrong people on wrong jobs, good people will be set up to fail. And with you taking a little bit of intentionality and making sure that everything is set correctly, and you take care of your people, sprinkle in some empathy, and you can supercharge people. And that's the difficult part of being a manager and a leader.
The phrase that I use to describe that exact concept is compensate for the behaviors that you want.
Yeah.
A lot of people will compensate for an hour of painting. Here's $25, go paint for me for an hour. But like, what does that say to your painter who you're paying $25 to for that hour? What does that say to them about their ownership of the job, right? Yeah. Of their love for the company, of their desire to go above and beyond, if at the end of the day, they're going to make 25 times 8 no matter what.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And I do take a Minnesotan and I raise you a Canadian.
Oh, man. Okay. Never mind then. This is going to be a passive aggressive off here pretty soon.
Oh man. Yeah. Anyway, we'll keep going. We'll keep going. Yeah. So last 12 months, more or less, approximately, what's your average 12-month revenue? Average revenue over the last 12 months?
3 million.
3 million. Okay. Wicked. And Brad asked me to ask you, how long did it take for you to reach 100 Google reviews?
Oh, stop it. This is Brad being one of those CrossFit mod guys now. Okay. A long time. All right. So I've been in business for 15 years. The first decade was super unintentional. I don't even think I had Google anything for a while. Yeah. I think in the last 2 years, we've gone from probably 30 to over 200. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's not a fair question from him, because I'm just getting to know you. So he went into his business and immediately supercharged it. Whereas you took the slow approach, which is, there's not a right or wrong way to do it. It's just different ways.
Asterisk with love. Also, if I only ran $1 million business, I'd have lots of time for reviews too. Hey, Ellison, come on, buddy.
Yeah, that's excellent. So $3 million, that is a threshold that 99+% of painting contractors will never reach in a painting business, because specific to painting, quite a low average job size. That's a lot of moving parts, a lot of painters, a lot of technicians. What are the lessons that you have learned over the last 3 years in terms of yourself to be the leader that you need to be to run a $3 million enterprise?
You need to be somebody that you're probably not most of the time. And understanding perspective is the biggest thing for me. Owning a job versus owning a business. The difference between technician, manager, and leader. The difference in the human personalities that assume a salesperson versus an estimator, a craftsperson versus apprentice. And these are all super different people. We just think that if somebody is here for long enough, we should make them a manager or a leader. And that is completely not dependent on their tenure. That is completely dependent on their personality and their developed skills. So the thing that I have now known to my deepest core, especially over the last 2 years of kind of passing that 1.7 to $3 million threshold, is I am a visionary. I am a founder. I am a scaler. I am a cowboy in a lot of regards. I love systems. I love working systems, but I still have that firefighter cowboy in me. When I cross the threshold from 2.5 to 3 and now farther, my company does not need a cowboy founder scaler anymore. We need a professional managing CEO. And that is honestly one of the most difficult things that I've ever done and am still doing in my life, is transitioning from that. And most of the time, statistically, the founder, the scaler, the cowboy will never be able to be that person. So I'm open to the idea that I might never be able to, but I'm sure as hell going to try.
For sure. Yeah, there's like just recently, a very publicly, the founder of Uber got ousted because he was not the leader that, he was the leader that they needed to get them to whatever, go public and whatever $1 billion, but he wasn't the leader that they needed to take him to the next level. So he got outed. That's happened to Steve Jobs. That happened to a lot of visionaries.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So what do you, I mean, it's not a bad thing to not be that person. It's just,
No,
some people can't do it, and it can be wonderful. So that transition, when it comes to tactical day-to-day activities, let's start at that, that $1.5 million ish small business like Brad.
Yeah. We'll call it a baby business. Yeah.
Sure.
Good start.
Keep
A good start.
the
Yeah.
respect on. What are the changes in day-to-day activities that you would do as you were going from a 1.5 to a $3 million business?
Yeah. So
because I imagine that you're not doing stain samples every day like I saw you do on your Facebook Live.
No, that's for the love of the game, man. That's for the love of the game. That's 5:30 a.m. in the shop, so I can scratch my craftsman itch. So yeah. So basically, there's a lot of nice thresholds in this industry, somewhere between 5 and 800K, maybe even $1 million. You can sort of like even do some painting. You run 3-4 crews, maybe 5 crews. You do all the estimating. You do all the project managing. It's the cowboy phase. There's a lot of businesses that are a cowboy and 7 to 10 painters, great. You're $1 million business, and that's good. At 1.5, you're really at that threshold where you either exceeded your cowboy, and now you're just at wit's end. Everything's falling apart. Marriage is going to be divorced, things like that. Or at that 1.5, you might be able to afford an estimator or a project manager. And at that point, you now have moved from technician to leader and manager. So you need to assume the visionary position, but you also need to manage highly the activities of your leadership team and your painters. And that is not, I'm out there making big relationships, selling jobs, I'm doing the visionary stuff, and everybody else just work. You need to be that consistent, not extreme manager who does all that boring, mundane, unsexy stuff. You hold micro accountability, you coach, you mentor, you have weekly one-on-ones, and you hold people accountable to basic systems. And that honestly is really, really hard for visionaries, founders, and scalers.
I find that that's even harder for technicians.
Huge. And again, we should say this over and over and over again. This is not a value judgment. This doesn't mean somebody's good. It doesn't mean somebody's bad. It just means that it is. And I have a really good insight. You do too. When you go from technician to manager to leader, I've put all those hats on. So we can say that the mind of a technician is not that of a manager and a leader. It could be, but it's not generally.
How did you decide that you were ready to go from technician to manager?
Again, a series of sort of optimistic and impatient decisions on my part of, the crazy, when I travel around and talk to other painting contractors, I throw a graph up of my 15 years. And basically it's like Nick wandering through the dark wilderness of business ownership and craft, working 100 hours a week. And then I got involved with other people, got intentional and grew. And first year was 10 people. Next year was 22 people. And we've basically just gone up like that in the last 6 years. It was basically just like, hey, I got a high pain tolerance and a lot of capacity, and I feel like I just want a big business because I like all these people around me. So we kind of just did it and made up for it in the arrears. And that is the true act of a cowboy firefighter, grower, scaler, founder.
I love it. I love it. That's great. Intentionality is kind of the word of the day there.
Yeah.
What were the actions that you took when it came to creating the demand needed to hit that first level of scale?
Again, I did not create any of that. It already existed. And it was one of those things like I did that hero's journey that every paint business owner does, which is I hired teachers and students first in the summer because I knew they had some place to go to. And if I
Yeah.
didn't have enough work, I could just, well, you're a student anyway, go back to school.
Yeah.
I was so nervous when I hired my first full-time year-round painter, and I couldn't figure out how the heck I was going to keep him busy during the winter. And magically, we were just slam packed, 100 hours a week, me and him, all that stuff. And every time I added a painter, magically, there was still more demand, more demand. It turns out that the demand was always there. It's just I opened myself up to the universe. When you actually look at like when a single owner operator says, well, I don't know if I can hire a person and keep them busy, you're probably turning down 70% of the potential leads that come to you, whether you know it or not, just by pre-qualifying people when you don't need to, or telling people how far you out. Well, if I hire another painter, I just cut my lead time in half, and I could probably capture another 50% of leads just by that.
And not to mention a concept that I personally dealt with is if you are responsible for somebody else and their paycheck and their family, you're going to pull bunnies out of hats when it comes to keeping them busy.
Man, okay, listen, we are brothers in this because I have said those exact words. Because I'm a loudmouth on the internet, people send me a lot of messages, DMs on Instagram and Facebook, and they're like, how do you know if you're ready to have your first person? It's like, hey, just like when you have a kid, you find a way to feed them. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember like this one time, not that this is about me today, but I had, I think it was 6 or 7 painters. It was Wednesday afternoon. We had work until Friday. We had nothing booked for Monday. I did the only thing I knew how to create immediate demand is I knocked on 500 doors every single night for that whole week. And I think I booked like 60K.
That's
Boom,
it.
we had work.
It's amazing what happens when you actually put effort towards something. That's the same thing that you were talking about. Hey, I can't find any good help. It's like, show me what you did. Well, hey, I went on Facebook and I said, help wanted, must lift 50 pounds, no drug stuff, no laziness, and nobody came. So there's no good people out there. But magically, if you call 100 people in your Rolodex and ask if they're kids or their friends or if they want a job, oh, something will shake loose, right?
Yeah, it's weird. No one wants to work for 25 bucks an hour, no incentives. Why not? Why can't I find anyone good who wants to work like that?
Interesting.
So you're making this transition from technician to manager. That's step one. I kind of like that technician, manager, leader. It kind of goes between like, the PCA breaks down 0 to 500, 500 to 1, 1 plus. That's like the technician, the manager, the leader. So you make some initial adjustments. You bring on some team members. You start doing more business. So this is now the first time in your life where you're managing 2, 3, 4 crews. What did you learn and how did you manage this new operation when you had never done that type of work before?
I did it the stupidest way you possibly could with grit and a high pain tolerance. So
Okay.
I made up for everything with hours. Literally, I like in my mind, it was like, hey, if I want to make 20% more, I'll work 20% more hours this year. That's just how the world works.
Yep.
And it was very clear to me that I was introduced to a concept very early on where high pain tolerance, grit, manual labor, baling twine, and duct tape can hold something together, or a system can hold things together. And by simplifying and creating a system, now you can move into the manager role where all you're doing is holding people accountable to the system after you train them, right?
Mhm.
It's not
Yep.
just throwing people out there. This is that delegating thing that nobody.
Delegate versus dump.
Exactly. So if you actually train people in the right way, have a comp plan that incentivizes them to follow the thing, and then hold them accountable to it, the system then runs the process, and you and your grit and high pain tolerance do not hold it together.
Yeah. And you start with, having that system and having intentionality with the outcome that you're trying to get from that system.
Yep.
And then you get a magical thing called leverage.
Leverage. That's right. Yep.
And that is the opposite of being a technician, is utilizing leverage to grow your business.
That's it. And I will say this, there are guys like you and Brad Ellison who we always joke, right? Brad has a great sense of humor, toughest guy on the face of the planet, very self-effacing. He's doing this way better, way faster than I ever will. Everything I did was unintentional. I did it. I found 22 people and I didn't have an SOP. I didn't job cost. I didn't have a metric-based bidding system. I just did it, man. Every single thing I did it. And then I found the friction point. And then afterwards, we created a system for it. So what I'm seeing are guys like you, guys like Brad, and just about everybody else coming into this, doing it way smarter than me. So that's why I joke about this. And that's why I can say such kind of forceful things sometimes, because you're never going to find anybody who did this the harder way than I did.
Yeah, I don't think, I certainly did not. And I mean, there's one of two ways. Once someone is in business for 10 years, typically the two things that can happen from that is they continue on that same trajectory, same path for another 10 years, or they quit because their pain tolerance just gives up. Very infrequently do you see someone who does something for 10 years and then goes up, and 10x's their business in a matter of a couple of years.
No. And I've gotten that feedback from the industry too, that everybody kind of looks at me, especially the people who do this way better than me, which are almost everybody. They're always like, boy, didn't see that coming, Nick. Normally guys like you just flame out real quick. And I think if anything else, I was just like open to the universe. And I that self-effacing Minnesota thing, where it's like, listen, I'm feeling friction here. Listen, I have all the grit in the world. I'm willing to point it in any direction. Problem is, I wasn't raised in a professional business. I'm not sure which way to point that compass. And then I had people like Jason Paris and the Kuipers and a whole bunch of other PCA members basically pull me aside and be like, this is your direction right here. And that's all I needed.
Yeah. So having mentorship, taking advice, and learning from other people has been kind of a pretty crucial aspect to your success.
It's everything. And like I said, it's not a coincidence that my hockey stick curve, the base of that hockey stick, you're Canadian, you understand what I'm talking about when I reference a hockey stick. Yes.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So in the hockey stick curve, like, at the base of that, that's literally when I joined the PCA and started talking to other painters and stopped thinking about people as enemies. And my entire world opened up.
Yeah. 100%. I love that. So, as you continue to grow, one of the things that you mentioned at Blast Off, and this is interesting, I think, is that you try to maintain like a sub 10% cost of marketing. Now that you're growing, you said you want to keep your marketing costs less than 10% of revenue. Is that accurate?
Yeah. The benchmarks that I go are, my goal is 3.5. I operate at a 5 to 6, and I can do 7 to 10 when I really need to put the pedal down and grow.
Okay. When in your hockey stick, did you realize that you had to start marketing?
Well, what's really interesting, we should throw a little asterisk on this too, which is Slavics have been known for painting in this area for 45 years. So when I say that 40% of all of my leads and completed work come from word of mouth, repeat, and referral, that is because the Slavics have been operating. The name Slavic has been synonymous with painting in this area for 45 years. And also my business has been operating for 15 years. So you just naturally accumulate more tentacles in that spider web and word of mouth and stuff. So asterisk there, somebody in their first year is not going to have that.
You can't buy that.
No, you can't buy that. You can certainly buy it over the years by being good and consistent. But yeah, that's, So what I found out that, I first had to market, and I've seen this data point in other companies, after about $500,000. And it's not because you're running out of work. It's because the work doesn't come when you want it. There's $2 million worth of work in summer, and there's 500,000 in winter, and we need 1 million. We need 500 in summer and 500 in winter, give or take, or vice versa. We need 1 million in summer, 1 million in winter, and we're still not going to be able to meet demand in summer. And then we're still scratching for work in winter. So what I found is that after I did 500K, I wanted to even out the demand curve from summer and put a little bit of that in winter because I had so many employees now. So that's marketing for me was not because we were running out of work. It's because I wanted it at different times of the year to maintain consistency.
Yeah. Okay. And what were the demand levers that you pulled at that time going into the fall?
Well, okay. So this is ancient history now. When I started my business, there was no Facebook, Instagram, even Google, and any of that stuff. So literally, it was yellow pages and a newspaper ad, and that fueled everything. I know. I don't hold back the laughter. Hold back the laughter. Old man Nick here, right?
Yeah.
But no, literally,
What's a newspaper?
that's what I still have a newspaper ad because it's got a great ROI. Now it's not
Yeah.
scalable because it only goes out to 30,000 people in my local community, but
Yep.
the ROI is better than Google. If I could scale it up, I would.
Yeah.
No, what we did was initially we did the old timey stuff, right? The things that were available to me. But my organic uh, social media presence really fueled a lot of stuff early on, and it wasn't because I had this ads or anything else. I've only done ads in the last 4, 5, 6 years. It was just because I didn't even have a business page for the most part. It was just Nick Slavik was on Facebook and Instagram, and I was just posting, and it showed people I really love my job. People followed it, and naturally the word of mouth and everything spread. So it was just a lot of just natural posting. I'm not an aggressive salesperson. I could never do the door knocking like you did. That stuff is against my core. I absolutely envy you for stuff like that. So everything I do is very passive, which is I just make a lot of stuff out there and it accumulates.
I think if you had painters that needed work and you didn't have work coming up on Monday, you might do it.
You're right. You're right. And I probably did that in some other way, just didn't realize it.
Yeah. You do what you need to do
Exactly.
to keep the ball rolling. The show must go on. What is the process? And I'm sure you didn't have a process before, but I'm sure you have a process now. What is the process that you use to create a new system in your business when it warrants it?
So I actually have an infographic for this because,
Amazing.
yeah,
How
again,
can we see the infographic? Is it on the internet somewhere?
I can send it to you. I send it to thousands of painters. It's a one-page, four-step process how I come up with an SOP. And again, this was not like, again, I'm not a consultant, I'm not a marketer, I don't have anything to sell. I am just a dude running a paint business who loves to be a loudmouth on the internet. And so many people have given me stuff. I share my stuff back. I think that's that servant leadership, right?
Yeah.
So many people, because of that ask a painter loudmouth stuff, they come to me and they're like, "Hey, Nick, I've been working for 6 months on making my SOPs. I'm stuck. I can't do it." And I try not to get spicy with our industry, but I'm like, 6 months? All you're doing is writing down how you paint bedrooms. Like, just write it down. Like, what is whole? And that's not a good way to manage and lead, right? But so many people asked. I just said, well, here's how I did it. And to paint a bedroom, there's only 4 steps: prep, top one, top two, deep prep. That's an SOP. That's all you need, right? That is literally an SOP. It took us 3 seconds, but that you can't train somebody on that, and then you can't hold somebody accountable to that. You got to add some more steps. So in the process of my 4-step process for setting up an SOP, I'll put in the main painting steps: put a drop cloth down, patch the walls, switch plates off, mask all the woodwork. Okay, there's all your prep. We'll do minimum stuff clockwise, top to bottom, left to right, cut and roll one wall. There's your top coat 1 and top coat 2, and then deep prep, reverse action like that. And now in step 3 of that SOP builder is, what are the steps that aren't paint related that you need to do with this? And for my company, it starts with a yard sign. It talks about a project walkthrough with the client and then making a project plan. So I add in the things that aren't paint related. And then in the end, I just put it I make sure it's on a 1 page and it's a checklist, and I laminate it. And that's how we teach our people. So that can be done with estimating. That can be done with project management. It can be an office coordinator too. But that's how we start off with the basic, which is even a coordinator role: answer the phones, get materials, talk to clients. Great. But you can't train somebody. So you got to add in the flavor in there.
So to clarify and to break that down, number one is you need a title for the system that you're creating.
Yeah.
Then you break it down into the biggest steps possible. So
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to painting a room, your prep, your first coat, your second coat, and your deep prep, right? So you break it down to those categories, and then you just describe step by step how you do each one of those steps, do sub steps.
Yes,
Very easy once you
without
have it broken down.
painters are really bad at that. They will make an 18-page document. Your painters will never adhere to an 18-page document. So
Okay. So having it be 1 page is just as important as the system itself.
to me, I think the only reason we hold it all together here is because I am a super big fan of simplicity, and I will intentionally leave stuff out. I know that it might be a pain point or a friction point, but I think we get higher compliance because we have simpler systems. And I would much rather have everybody comply with an 80% perfect plan than only 10% comply with a perfect plan. That's my strategy.
Yeah. Pareto's principle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So simplicity, I love it, and that makes I mean, when you think about creating an SOP library, it's like, oh, I need to create an SOP live. I actually see painters like put that in their calendar. Sunday afternoon, create SOP library. It's like, okay, well, I need an SOP for how to create an SOP library. That's just too big of an elephant to
It
eat,
spiral out.
right? So where do you start? As you were growing your business, what were the systems that you created first? How did you document them, and how did you share them with your team?
It's easy. I actually have we're going SOP on SOP on SOP. I have a 6-step process on how I professionalize my business. So if you want to talk simple, we take everything that a professional business is, and I wrote it down in 6 steps to give to other people. And step number 1 is your delivering your standardized product. So I don't think any painting business should go farther than painting SOPs. If that is your trade, you first need to be able to look a client in the eye and deliver a standardized product. Outside of that, who cares about marketing? Who cares about estimating? You need to deliver a standardized product.
So quick question on that. Do you hire subs?
Yes.
What if you have a sub that paints a room differently? Say for your process, you like to patch and then you use a water-based primer on the patches instead of painting, but this sub prefers to just use wall paint over the patches. How do you deal with a sub who might have different processes than you when it comes to delivering the end result to your customer?
2 things. We offer projects to a sub based on an outcome. We use duration home mat on walls. It's 2 coats professional over patch stuff. They can do all the primer they want, but in my company, we don't need primer because it doesn't flash when we use duration home mat. When we have a job packaged for one of our trade partners, our subcontractors, it lists what we deliver to the client. And in fact, we actually have 2 beautiful little columns that says, our trade partner, this is what you owe me and the client. And my company, NSPRC, this is what we owe the client and you. And it basically just lists out that thing. And if they want that job, they can take it. If they don't want that job, if they think that, hey, I only 1 coat walls, we say, great, that job's just not for you. And in fact, in my company, we always do 2 coats, so maybe we're not a good fit. But we sell, this is what we have sold to the client. We'll partner with you to do it, but this is what we sold to the client, and we need to follow through on those expectations.
I like that. And that's being picky with the subs that you use. And I think a lot of people get into the business of using subs when they're in a position of desperation versus a position of strength.
And they think that just by hiring somebody else, some problem is going to be solved without managing and accountability. And that is the thinking of a founder, scaler, visionary leader, and not of a manager. You know that every human has to be managed. I have to be managed. You have to be managed. I'm heavily managed,
Yeah.
more so than anybody else in my company because of that.
Yeah. Like how many, painters have you talked to who they said their sub didn't work out, and then you dig into it? How did you, tell me about how you hired the sub? Well, I met him at the job site. I showed him the job and they went and started painting it. It's like, okay, well,
And
we
then
missed a lot of steps.
and then they'll say, yeah, the sub controls all the materials. The sub decided how to do it, when to do it. And yes, legally, there is a lot of that stuff you have to do. But you went and sold that job and you promised something to the client. And if that sub does something different than that promise, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yep, 100%. And I always recommend, I don't know if you do this, but I always recommend painting with your subs or being on site for that first day, or at least the first half a day, and oversee them, because they're representing your company. They're representing your organization, and you're responsible for their output.
Yeah, and the longer I do this, every year we do more and more W-2 work, and every year we do more and more sub work, trade partner work, and the proportion is getting even more skewed to my company is being more and more every year trade partner versus W-2. Now we're still the majority W-2, but I see the exact similarities in those things, and I see everything as this beautiful way to help my clients. And there are some pros and cons of each. And yeah, it's just one of those things where instead of just having W-2s or just trade partners, now I have all of them and I have twice the amount of potential solutions for my clients.
It's wonderful. So we talked about starting as a technician and then becoming a manager. And the big transition there is creating SOPs, creating systems, and managing a team. Nick, tell me a little bit about your transition now from manager to leader. And I understand that you're still in this cowboy to CEO phase, right? How are you managing this transition to leader, and like what are some of the struggles that you personally are having with it?
Well, so here's I struggle a lot more with this sort of thing, just because of my upbringing, how I was raised, and all this, and I'm developing this thought where I'm always going to be the technician, right? I am a master crafts person. There's nothing my people will ever do that I haven't done thousands of times over. I There is not a thing on a house that needs to be painted that I don't have 100 great solutions and data points for. I will always be the technician and the technical advisor to my company. From day one, I've always been the leader. You don't kind of move into leadership. I think you always still have to be the leader, because that is when we talk about loneliness and solitude and singularity, there is only one visionary for every company. There's not three, right? And so even as a sole owner operator, solopreneur, you are still the technician and the leader. Now, there's nobody to manage, so you're not a manager unless you need to manage yourself. What's weird is that if you think about technician, manager, and leader, I'm always this, and I'm actually becoming more of the middle. And the middle is becoming that manager is becoming more and more important, because as your company grows and professionalizes, you need way more better managers than you do technicians and leaders. So managing all of a sudden in the last year and a half, 2 years has been the most important thing in my life. And I will be very honest, circle of trust, right? Um, it's very difficult for me. It's very difficult. Now I have processes, I have systems, I have lots of accountability levers for myself, people to hold me in there, coaches, mentors, therapists, things like this. But when you try to do something so against your natural abilities and your natural proclivities, it can add a lot of stress to your life, and it has over the last couple of years. I'm not going to lie to you.
100%. Yeah, when you're doing things outside of your zone of genius, it can be stressful, it can be tough, and there can be, implications even at home, right? That you bring home with
Oh,
you that you don't intend to.
it's everything. And I will be upfront and honest and say I've neglected my family for 15 years because of this sort of thing. Like we have a way of, like, in the upper Midwest and Canada, martyring ourselves for this, thinking it's the greater good. And a much better manager would be way more consistent and metered with their time in all aspects of their life, and not just the craft and growing a business and things like that. And I'm very happy to see now that our industry is full of people who have the healthiest, most beautiful, very efficient way of growing a family and growing a business at the same time. And I will say that I am the youngest of an old generation, the oldest of a young generation. I kind of have my foot between two generations. And I had kind of the worst of both worlds, where super fast, accelerated, aggressive growth, modernization, systems, everything. But I still had that old regressive mindset of some bad leadership, no management skills, and yeah, lots of stress and neglecting the family. So yeah.
So now that you are square in the leadership position, what does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, so it ebbs and flows, and I think of my company as little development areas, little silos. You have my W2 painters, you have my subs, you have project management, you have estimating, and you have coordination, kind of like office admin, give or take. Then there is my stuff, the marketing, the leadership, the visionary, things like that. As we grow, a much more mature, seasoned professional would probably allocate even time to all those things and just micromanage. When I say micromanage, not like being that regressive micromanager, but day-to-day accountability, little stuff, guiding and mentoring your team. What I've done over the last couple of years, I actually don't know if it's a good strategy or not, but I devote myself wholly to almost one thing, quickly shore it up. This goes back to sort of the impatient optimist sort of thing, where if W2s need me, I'm going to spend 6 months with them. We're going to coach. We're going to create systems. We're going to create active leadership and active planning. We're going to create systems of accounting for hours and mentoring and incentivizing. And then we get a great result. But meanwhile, I'm neglecting the other parts. And so over the last 3 years, I've kind of taken this strategy of devoting time to each of those silos. I'm on my last silo now that really, really needs me. It's the thing that I've innovated the least over the last couple of years, the project management. We just instituted a brand new system. Everything is brought up to speed. And now I'm entering into this phase of, instead of wholly devoting myself to one, I wholly devote myself to 5 in small parts every day. And that's been a huge transition for me.
So what does that look like on on a daily basis now? Are you touching on all 5 of them every day, or like one per day, each week? How do
Yeah.
you separate your time?
Well, mainly it's a lot of it. So now, instead of quarterly meetings or yearly meetings, we're doing weekly one-on-ones with all key leaders in the company, and that is the micro
And those are
accountability.
your project managers and your salespeople.
Estimators, office coordinator, things like that. Yeah. So
Okay.
it's mainly keeping those people accountable, up to speed, mentored, trained, things like that. We have an immense amount of contact with our painters, and I've devoted a ton of time to them and the subs recently. So they are rocking and rolling. They're doing great work. But
How many direct reports do you have? How many people report to you?
phew, it'll be probably no less than 25 and probably no more than 40. So that is this is something that we're trying to iron out in the business. And I don't want to say iron out because it's not a problem, but nobody should have that many direct reports. But the problem is, I mean, do you make some of your painters report to your estimators? Like, no. So really, when the buck stops, I'm the one who does pay and comp, and they are my direct report. So
Mhm.
I can handle it. It's probably not advisable,
Mhm.
but for this stage of the business, 3 million is a great. I consider it a baby professionalization where you can afford redundancy, 2 project managers, 2 estimators, a whole bunch of W-2s, a finishing facility, a foreman, all this other stuff. The problem is you can't afford a general manager or a CEO yet. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
thinking 4.5, 5.5, 6.5. And that is a whole nother level of business where you throw in a level of management between the visionary and your operators, your leadership team, and that would be like an integrator role. But I don't think I can afford that right now.
Isn't it funny how the goalposts change as the business grows?
Dude, it is so true. Like I literally said the words out loud to somebody else. When I run $1 million painting business, I mean, where do you keep that much money? I have so much time. I'm gonna have to build a building on my farm to put cash, and I'm gonna have to find some more hobbies. And it's like soon you realize that $1 million is probably the most stressful, craziest cowboy form of business you can ever run.
Yep. 100%. And it's funny because once you have this ever elusive $1 million per year business, and then you get there and you're like, oh, that's it.
That's it. Yeah,
you
it's
know?
like I thought doves were supposed to fly out from behind me, and the sun was supposed to peek out, and harp music was going to play, and it's
Yeah,
like,
the only thing that changes is you look at like your P&L at the end of the month, you're like, oh, that was a lot of revenue that month. I hope the profit catches up.
yeah, and typically it's not.
Yeah.
Typically it's not. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but
And
no,
then
and oh, go ahead.
I like that baby professional business
Yeah,
because I find myself comparing my business to baby professional businesses. Now you look at $5 million, $10 million businesses, and then even a $10 million business is a baby business in the grand scheme of things.
compared to all business, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, it is funny how the goalpost changes. Um, now you as you've become this leader, and you've been kind of being pushed into a position that isn't necessarily your favorite. How have you balanced the home life and not bringing your stress from work home when you're with your wife and your kids? Because I'm a family man first. My wife and my kids always take number one priority, and I try not to bring work home, but sometimes it does come home.
Yeah.
So what are your strategies there?
I will say this upfront and honest because sometimes it's just nice to hear. I like to think of myself as a family man first and foremost, and my actions over the last 15 years have proven I'm not. You will look at my devotion of time and energy and thought, and it has not been to my family. Doesn't mean I don't love them. Doesn't mean I don't spend more time than anybody else I know with them in my peer group. But that has been a very difficult thing for me. I was raised in this sort of very stern, bohemian Norwegian sort of thing where love and affection wasn't really one of those things. You spent time with your family if you needed to. I mean, my parents' generation was really, we were the latchkey kids. Like the less time we could spend with our kids, the better. That was sort of my parents' ethos, and God love them. But
Yeah,
I was on my own, man, my entire life. So
kids
um,
are to be seen and not heard.
that's it. And again, it's caught between two generations because that's like World War One, the silent generation, and the baby boomers, World War II generation. That's how they raised Gen X.
Mhm.
And I'm either the youngest Gen X or the oldest millennial or somewhere in between. And I have a whole bunch of those really crappy regressive traits when it comes to family. And I will say, anybody who knows me, I've made a lot of strides in the last 5 years. For me, the only way I've been able to do this is accountability partners, which is I'm not able to self-regulate in this sort of way. And I've gotten very intentional with people that I care about, holding me accountable to, Nick, you say you're going to do this. Let's actually see if you do. And if you don't, we're all going to be here to stand there and correct you. So
what are the, so, I mean, accountability is enormous.
everything.
You know, we in my coaching program, you know, we find that if you don't have accountability, you're just not going to do the thing. It's very hard to be accountable to yourself.
No,
So
almost no. Well, okay. Jason Paris can do this.
Some people can.
That's one person I know that can do this.
You know what, when it comes to fitness and like working out, some people need a coach. I don't need a coach. I don't need accountability for that. But for business, I absolutely do.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. How do you, when you're with your family, how do you turn off the business just so you can focus on family? Do you put your phone in a different room? Do you, or is that not even a problem?
No, this is something I'm still really working on, right? Because being present is being physically and mentally in the same place. And I am not good at that, right? I'm 1,000 miles away most of the time. That is all self-imposed. People like me will make the argument that, hey, listen, if I don't do this, X will happen. And my accountability partners are wonderful with saying, really? You think that's going to happen? Has it ever happened? Will it ever happen? Just prove to me once that that cataclysmic thing is going to happen. You've been doing this for 15 years, way longer than anybody in the industry, right? Like painting companies last 1 to 3 years. You've been doing this so long, this hasn't burst into a ball of flames. So just tell me where the data is on that. And so most of the neglect in this area of my life has been self-imposed, and it's been this false sort of standard that I put on myself that what my business needs. I gave myself permission about a year or two ago to not do that, and it was very hard. I felt like neglectful. I felt unempathetic, and it's very uncomfortable for me. And I'm doubling down on it now as we get into late summer and winter, and it's still uncomfortable. But setting time boundaries, having accountability partners, and shoring up your business so you have non-chaotic systems so you're not contacted outside of work is a big thing, because you can focus on it yourself and you can say, I'm not answering my phone after 5. But if you've created this crazy chaos machine that needs you after 5, too bad. You have to punch in after 5. So it's that thing of you and your family setting boundaries, but also doing the work to make a business that isn't chaotic after 5.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And that comes all the way back to the start of our conversation around SOPs,
Yeah.
templates, having systems for everything, having accountabilities, and hiring great people.
Great people.
You can have a great system, but if you try teaching a B or a C player a great system, it's not gonna work.
Yeah. And I've found myself recapture more present, peaceful family time the more I've become a good manager of this company. Honestly, it's that unsexy, mundane, boring stuff of just like, for me, and I say that jokingly, but honestly, I get a lot of energy from it when you're empathetic with your people and you're not checking in just once a year, once a quarter. It's that daily thing of supporting your people, maintaining the standards, slightly nudging and coaching and mentoring when somebody doesn't meet the standard. It's unending. It's insistent. It's just constant. And it's a very difficult thing for me to do, but I've kind of found a working system for it. The better I've done with that, the less after 5 communication my company needs of me and the more family time I'm getting.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. Take care of your business, set it up in the right way, and then that will give you the freedom that you need to have a fulfilled family life that doesn't, get pulled every which way.
Well, Mike, and this is like a huge friction point because we really try to stick to a 4-day work week for most of our W-2 painters. Our leadership team works 4.5 days, and our subcontractors work 7 days. So you can see some potential friction areas here of wanting to support your people, but also if our subs work 7 days a week, you could easily get pulled into 7-day-a-week job. So
yeah, 100%. What is your goal with your company? Where do you see your company within the next 3 years if everything could go according to plan?
Yeah, this is, like you said, the goalposts move. Boy, when I was a single owner operator, I could chart out every day for the rest of my life, revenue goals, numbers of people, things like that. And that has literally become a little harder to pinpoint the more I know about this business and the more I understand what it takes to run one of these. So it's pretty easy for me now to understand the intervals in which businesses grow, right? You go to 500, then you go to 1 million, and then you go to 1.5, then you go to 3, then you go to 4.5, and you can basically grow a res repaint company in intervals of about 1.5 million, because that's what a project manager and an estimator can do. And eventually, when you have 2 to 3 of those, you need a manager to manage them. And then you have to grow in revenue to afford a general manager. So you can see how it escalates. And then not only do you have the plateaus and growth, but you have within those plateaus and growth, you have this until you get general management. And then you go like this. And then there's another plateau of overhead. So for me, it's a math problem from here on out. And now what used to be super clear of like, hey, just 8 million bucks. What the heck? It's just humans. Stack them up. I can make an org chart for an $8 million company right now. When you actually look at the bubbles on your org chart and understand the caliber of human that it takes and the caliber of management that it takes to manage those caliber of humans, you now realize this is hard, man. And not many people do it. And not many people in the regular business world do it. If it was easy, a lot more people would do it. So now I think about it differently, which is, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And I can probably run this $3 million company for the rest of my life very profitably, have free time, lots of fun. My people will be taken care of like nobody else. But if I go past this, I'm probably going to have to find another human to do it for me.
So how do you decide if you go into the zone of uncomfort or do you stay comfortable? That's the constant battle in business. Is it just a
Oh,
battle for growth or is it a battle for sustainability?
dude, that's personal, right? Like you could make this argument, and this is something that I'm still coming to terms with and trying to like apply data and feelings and things. Most people can cowboy to a million. You might make the argument that because of my super high pain tolerance, which I'm not bragging about, it's actually very harmful for business owners to have this. I think I cowboyed to 3 million. And you could make the argument I cowboyed to 3 million, which probably isn't a good thing. Probably isn't a good thing. So I will say this. I love being uncomfortable. I love reach goals. I'm a practicer of grit, which is intentional practice, reach goals constantly, all the time. I love pushing myself. I love pushing others. Some people don't like to be pushed. So you have to be careful with how you grow your company, because you can say, I feel like going into the uncomfortable and growing this big. It's like, well, do any of your people? Because they may all leave and you may not have a choice. And if you're not a manager and you're just a leader, this cowboy, you might be leading these people into trench warfare with no managers. So to me, I understand the constraints now of the limits of humans and why businesses fail and why they cap out. Like you look at the paint franchising systems a lot. On a whole, all of the franchise are typically more professional and bigger than most other painting companies, but they all cap out between about 1 million and 1.5. And it's solely dependent on the human operating it. Because all the systems are there. You take like CertaPro, it's a crazy big company. It's super professional, but yet there's not a lot of $20 million CertaPros. And you think, well, why? If they can't do it, why? You're limited by the human at the helm of that and their ability to operate as a technician, manager, and leader.
That is a great way to put it. I know a lot of CertaPro franchisees and great, wonderful people and business people first too. So I guess that just goes to show how difficult of a challenge it actually is to break through that, $3 to $5 million threshold.
And again, we'll say it again. This isn't a value judgment. It's not good. It's not bad. It just is.
Of course.
All the franchises, you can actually look up these. I forget the names of the documents, but they have to report on this and they have to tell you how many franchises, what the average size is. So this is just data, right? And yes, they're better than most, but still, they're not 10 times bigger than the average painting company. So it
I think
is.
it's an earnings disclosure.
It is. That's exactly it. And it's a pure data point of you're limited by the human in charge.
100%. We'll wrap up here in a second, but it reminds me of a client of mine. He's been a franchisee for about 3 years and a very smart person, but the systems weren't quite working for him. He was stuck at about 9,000 a month for 3 years. Within 2 months, he got to 45,000. The third month he hit 60,000. And I think last month he hit 80,000. Just by tweaking a few things, helping him understand the systems that work with his business, giving him the accountability, and like it's just absolute day and night.
Love it. Yep. And sometimes these business owners just need the information. The system may be good, but just not for them. So
Yeah. But you're absolutely right, man. This has been a wonderful conversation. Technician to manager to leader to chairman of the PCA to all around badass and great human being, Nick Slavik. Thank you so much
Dude,
for being with me today.
listen, big fan of yours. Thank you for this opportunity. And this is an awesome conversation. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, man. And we will talk again for sure. And I will be seeing you in Florida. Thanks for listening to the Painter Growth Podcast. If you want to grow your painting business, go to www.paintergrowth.com or click on the top link in the description. Talk soon.